Just over an hour ago, Republicans killed their own bill to fund the government. House Speaker Mike Johnson tied the funding to the SAVE Act, requiring citizenship to vote, which is, of course, already law of the land, punishable by felony. And he did so at the behest of Donald Trump, who told Republicans not to agree to a continuing resolution to fund the government without it. But enough Republicans voted against it anyway, defeating their own plan for a short-term funding bill 13 days before government shutdown. I'm joined now by Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California. Speaker Emerita, it's good to have you on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it used to be something you never saw happen. The party leadership in the House bringing a bill to the floor that lost. It's now happens all the time. I wasn't even that surprised today. What do you make of today's vote?
Well, I think it's an example of ineptitude, but it's also an example of the president, former president, being a puppeteer, telling the Republicans in the House that they must shut down government really effectively, and as he usually does, shining lights on his puppet strings so they really look bad. But the fact is, I'm an appropriator, and that's where a budget bill comes from, the Appropriations Committee. Rosa DeLauro is our leader on the House side, and we've always said, left to their own devices, the Democrats and the Republicans on the Appropriations Committee can find a compromise, a solution. You just have to want to do that. Apparently, the Republican leadership in the House has decided they don't want to leave it up to the appropriators who know the legislation very well, and they want to leave it up to Donald Trump, who doesn't, but who wants to shut down government, which would be a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a situation in which there's broad bipartisan consensus to pass a continuing resolution, fund the government, and avoid a shutdown. But Donald Trump is obsessed with this piece of legislation, which essentially is a kind of institutionalization of the big lie. He said today in a rant on his social media, including many things, that they have to get the SAVE Act. He accuses Democrats falsely of registering illegal voters by the tens of thousands as we speak, and he calls this shutdown. So this is both. He wants them to shut the government down so that they could promote the big lie, basically, yes?
Well, you know what? Where his lips were moving, he was lying. And that's just the way it is. He sometimes doesn't even know what he's talking about, and other times he just makes it up as he goes along. But it's really a tragedy. And I just only wish they would leave it up to the Congress to pass the legislation that is necessary to keep government open. He's not even in the government, and yet he wants to shut it down. So it was really sad to see, because this is the second time, you know, they failed to pass the bill the first time they put it on the floor.
Yep. Now,
a week or so later, they're failing again by a strong number of votes, like 14 no's and two present. They can only lose about 4 votes, and they've lost 3 or 4 times that. So in any event, it isn't a good idea for the American people to have government to be shut down. So we should make every effort to keep it open. He might think it's politically advantageous because it makes us all look bad. But he doesn't know that the Republicans, every time they have shut down government, have had to pay a price for it. And it's not a price. We'd rather just debate the issues rather than have a shutdown of government to prove how inept and how bad the president is, the former president is on these issues.
I want to talk to you about the House, and particularly the prospect for Democrats retaking majority in the House, which I know is quite near and dear to your heart. And there are a bunch of races, competitive races, particularly in California and in New York, where that majority might get made. Now, you've got Trump tonight. I really think this is, I just did a whole bit on it. I don't know if you saw it, but
I saw it.
Okay. I mean, so he's in Long Island, right? He's on this sort of pander tour. Now he's promising that the tax law he signed into law, that, you know, whatever you think of it on the merits, he signed and definitely raised the taxes of some of those folks in Long Island, that he's going to get rid of it so that, I don't know, so that those Republicans can survive. What do you make of this astonishing 180 that he has pulled out here?
Well, I don't know if it's a 180 or if it's just, again, not telling the truth about
Right,
what
yes,
he
fair point, yes.
would do if he were to win. But he did want to punish blue states, California, New York, parts of Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and the rest, by this thing. Now, what people should understand about this is that state governments depend on this deduction because it enables them to use the money that people pay that local tax to fund government. But if they're not going to be able to deduct it, they might not engage in the purchases or whatever it is of real estate that enables the states to have those resources for government to work. And that's what they want. They want the government not to have the resources to make government work. They're anti-governance. They're anti-science. They're anti-Biden, of course. And so here they go. But, you know, really, I'm trying to really be nice. And we're into the seven weeks out minus 1 day. We think that we will win the House. I feel very strongly that we will. We've made a decision to win, and we're making every decision in favor of winning. And there are many races between California and New York where we think we can be successful. As you may recall, in the last election, people said we're going to lose 30 to 40 seats. I said that's impossible. It's impossible because we know our districts. And we know our issues, whether it's a woman's right to choose, whether it's gun violence prevention, whether it's saving the planet, our democracy as well. We knew the distinction, the contrast between Democrats and Republicans in these districts. We lost 5 seats, 5 of them in New York, and we hope to win those back, but more across the country. I don't want to just win 5 seats. I want us to win more like 15. So somewhere between 5 and 15 will be our victory. And again, because we know the districts and we listen to the people and we can make the contrast. So when he tries to go into New York and talk about undoing something that he did in a mean way. Now, let's just talk about what that was part of. That was part of his one, shall we say, accomplishment, if you want to say something he did while he was president, and they had the majority. They did one thing. They gave a tax cut to the richest people in America. The top 1% got 83% of the benefits. Top corporate and individuals. 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%, adding $2 trillion to the national debt. And then complaining to us when we want to have in our farm bill nutrition for people. But in the budget bill, when we want to have WIC, women, infant, and children, having food. So you see, a budget should be a statement of our values. They don't have, it isn't about values to them. It's just money to the richest people in America who fund their campaigns and who say now, don't pay any attention to what he says. They know he's a dolt, or they should, but most of them do. They know he's terrible. Don't pay attention to anything he says or does or anything.
Right.
Just look at what happens to your tax return if you're in the 1%. It's shocking. That's their patriotism.
I will briefly note that the one group of high earners that did see a tax hike from that bill is exactly the folks that got hit by the SALT deduction. That's the only one. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much. We fully intend to win. Thank you.
You made a decision.